All right, you may have heard the attorney say that she needed to speak to the judge about something outside the presence of the jury, so they're going to have the jury exit the courtroom, and then they will have that conversation. We'll certainly let you know what occurred as soon as we know. At this time, I'd like to introduce our special guest, Joseph Scott Morgan, a forensic expert. Thank you for joining us today for your expert analysis.
Hey, Ashley.
Hi.
Thank you for your expert analysis today.
Well, I loved visiting with you about these cases. Now, the first thing we were texting, and one of the things I said was, why a DNA sample of both the defendant, who's the mother of the child, and her boyfriend? What's your best guess on that?
I don't know. You know, something that kind of jumped to mind for me is that so many of these departments are now kind of making it part of their SOP, their standard operating procedure. I just wonder if this is something that they just do as a common practice. Also, maybe an establishment of parentage. You know, to see you know, if this child belongs to one or both of them. I don't know. I'm kind of grasping at straws now. There is a one-off chance that this might be something related to maybe another crime, and you never know. I don't know if there are elements within this crime, within the statutory obligations of the state, that kind of peg this to some type of sexual issue where people have to go into a registry and all this sort of thing. So I don't know. It's a very broad spectrum as far as I'm concerned, and I think that it's you know, it remains to be seen. Hopefully in the sidebar that they're having, maybe something will come about as a result of this.
So let's walk through the different steps. Before we get to what we believe to be the cause of death, let's talk about, you just heard the testimony that he said, well, they were waiting on the autopsy. So when he stopped them, they were in the car, got out the badge, said, you need to stop, we have a search warrant. They had not yet been arrested. He waited on the autopsy results. Now, from my legal position, waiting on the autopsy results is good, because then the prosecution knows what they're really looking at. Let me ask you, from your forensic perspective with that lens on, do you think it makes a difference if they wait for the autopsy report before arresting any suspects in the case?
Yeah, as long as the autopsy report is returned in a timely fashion. I think that the longer you wait, sometimes it can be particularly difficult. That's why communication between the law enforcement and the medical legal community is so important. And I can tell you, as a result of being involved in these cases in Atlanta and New Orleans over the course of my career, there is constant communication between law enforcement and those of us that populate the coroner's offices and medical examiner's offices, just keeping one another up to speed. There's a lot of stuff that's never released into the press and that sort of thing, because we don't want to divulge any information that the police are thinking about arresting someone or something like this. But that is very important. And again, back to what you were saying, foundationally, a lot of this case, the underpinning, Ashley, is scientific, is it not? You know, we're talking about things like starvation, dehydration, lack of care. One of the most striking things about this that's come out is the idea of this child sitting in this dirty diaper where the child has developed a severe rash. It's implied the child might have some type of widespread infection like a septicemia, and there are indwelling maggots. And a lot of this, from a scientific standpoint and establishing a timeline, is very important. So that's why the report, the initial autopsy report itself, is very, very crucial.
Okay, good. So we're going to watch now. This is a package that was put together to give you a summary of the case, which is a great overview of the allegations and history in this case regarding this 4-month-old.
A young Iowa mother faces first-degree murder and child endangerment charges in connection with the death of her 4-month-old baby, Sterling Keene. Sterling was found dead and covered in maggots in his baby swing on August 30th, 2017. Authorities say the baby had not had a diaper change, bath, or been removed from the seat in over a week. The parents, Zachary Keene and Cheyanne Harris, are charged with baby Sterling's death. Authorities first responded to the home that morning after Keene called 911.
And she come in, looked me up and said he's gone. Okay. Cheyanne did? Yeah. So I got on the phone and called y'all right away. I was a little disorientated and then woke up and told my son's dead.
He claimed the baby was fed at 9 a.m. that morning and was in good health. But when they checked on him just a few hours later, he had died. The medical examiner ultimately ruled the death as a homicide caused by failure to provide critical care after an autopsy found maggots in various stages of development on the infant. The baby also had an extreme diaper rash and caused E. coli to enter into his bloodstream. Zachary Keene testified at his trial in November, which we showed here on the Law&Crime Network. He said that Harris was the primary caretaker of the child. Keene was ultimately found guilty after about an hour of jury deliberations and sentenced to life in prison. He is now seeking a new trial. If convicted, Harris also faces life in prison, the mandatory sentence for first-degree murder in Iowa. I'm Rachel Stockman for Law&Crime Network.
A very sad, tragic case in my line of work as a juvenile court judge, very preventable death. So we will return to that testimony in that trial live when that's available. But first, a short break. Come right back to hear more on Law&Crime. Welcome back to Law&Crime. So let's talk about Iowa versus Cheyanne Harris. What's going on in that case right now? We were listening to testimony by a witness, and then one of the attorneys said, we need to talk to you, Judge, outside the presence of the jury. So we don't know exactly what they're talking about. The witness is Agent John Turbot, who's a criminal investigator in the case. So we're waiting for that to resume. Now, in the meantime, we want to listen to the 911 call. So remember, this is the very first instance of knowing anything was amiss with young Sterling, and it was Zachary Cohen, who has been convicted by a jury of murder and child endangerment in this death of Sterling, who made the call to 911. Let's listen.
Stock County 911.
This is Zach Cohen. We need an ambulance sent out here to my apartment.
Okay, what's your address, Zach?
107 South Hilltop Avenue in Alta Vista.
Okay, what's going on?
Around 9, my girlfriend went to feed our son, and then about 11 or 11:30, she went to check on him, and he was gone.
Gone meaning?
He died.
Okay.
He's at probably 4 months. I don't know if it's sudden death syndrome or what.
Okay, so you live at 107 South Hilltop in Alta Vista? What,
Apartment 7.
Apartment 7? Okay, and your son is 4 months old, and the last time that you was checked on was 9?
No, it was she was fed him at 9.
Okay.
And she hadn't heard him, she went to check on him, hadn't heard him cry or whatever, and so probably about 11:30, 11:40, she went to check on him. He passed.
That was part of the 911 call. Listen, Joe Scott Morgan, you just heard him say on the 911 call, he's gone, he's dead. I don't know if it's sudden death syndrome or what. You've heard testimony about this infant's underweight, crispy clothes, curled fist, stiff limbs, maggots. Is there any way that somebody could see that baby in that swing and possibly think maybe it's sudden death syndrome?
No, absolutely not. I don't think any right-thinking person could. This bears no similarity to a SIDS case or, traditionally what is referred to as crib death whatsoever. The child does fit within the age parameters, which generally runs roughly end of first month of life till roughly the 11th month. But beyond that, similarity ends. This child and this grown man good and well knew that this child is undernourished, wasted in appearance. The child has been seated in the swing for a protracted period of time in filth, his own filth. So no, this could not be mistaken for SIDS in any shape, form, or fashion.
So given the condition of the child and the obvious neglect of this child that caused all of these problems and the ultimate death murder of this child, are you surprised that they even called 911? Why not dispose of the body? Why call 911? There's been testimony that some witnesses didn't even know there was a baby in the house.
Yeah, it is a little bit shocking to our senses, particularly those of us, obviously, that are parents, I think, to a great degree. You think about the care that you provide to your child, these little ones, that are completely defenseless. You look at this particular case, and let me kind of paint a picture for you, because I've worked adult neglect cases that actually rival this. You could not have walked into that room. Remember, they talked about the length of time, and there's a time attachment going back to these indwelling maggots that they were referring to. Because generationally they've moved along, you could have not have walked into that room without flies lighting on you from this child's body. So there would have been an awareness. Maybe there's flies in other areas of the house, but there would have been a great number of them in this room. So I don't know, where you come up with this idea that the child died of SIDS. It's striking to me.
All right. It's really just a horrible case to hear the details. We are going to now listen to testimony pre-recorded of Tony Friedrich. Now, this is the first responder, the very first person on the scene following that 911 call.
Yes.
What did you do?
So I pulled up, and I pulled right up, and I saw a man, a woman, and a little girl. And I got out of my car and I went running up to them and said, "Where's the baby?" Nobody was showing any emotion, and the man goes inside, and I said, "Show me." And so he took me inside. We walked in, and we went to the back bedroom. He took me to the back bedroom, and it was dark, and it was stuffy, and there was a stench of urine there. I was looking for a crib. I couldn't see a crib. I said, "Where's the baby?" And he said, "In the swing." And it was dark. I said, "We've got to get some lights on in here. Turn the lights on." And he flipped the switch, and the lights came on. And he walked away, and he muttered something, and I don't know what he muttered.
What did you see when the lights came on?
Well, you could see the swing. It was facing an outside wall in the corner. And so then I went over so I could see Sterling, the baby. Found out that's what his name was. And to do my assessment, look, listen, and feel, his eyes were fixed and dilated, staring straight out. He had blood around his mouth, and I went to check a brachial pulse on him, and his arm was stiff and rigid and cold. All of his extremities were cold. His little feet were cold. His hands were clenched in a fist, and he wasn't breathing, and his clothes were like, yeah.
Did the room have windows in it?
There was blankets over the one window that was in there, so that it didn't show any light.
What did the room feel like?
It was hot. It was stuffy. There was the stench of urine.
What did you do?
Well, after I did my assessment and realized that I couldn't do anything. I called back into the sheriff's department and asked for the sheriff to come and another medical examiner.
Why did you call the sheriff's department?
Because this was not right. Something was not right.
Hearing those details is so hard, and it absolutely infuriates me that any child would be treated that way and murdered, quite frankly, by the neglect. I'm going to bring us back to professionalism by calling on you, Joseph, because you mentioned to me during that testimony you wanted to talk about discrepancy in the timeline of death. Tell us what you mean by that.
Yeah, when we heard the father's call earlier, it was a bit cloudy, so I was unable to make out all of the details, but I could have sworn that I heard him say that his wife had checked on the baby at 9 or 9:30 and the child had cried at that point in time. And then I think the 911 call came in at 11. So correct me if I'm wrong about this.
That's right.
But this lady is talking in terms of her initial assessment at the scene, and I think that this is key. She refers to the child as being stiff and essentially cold to the touch. If the child is stiff at this point in time, it can be concluded that the child is approaching fully developed rigor mortis at this point in time. This does not happen in a 2-hour period. This happens over a protracted period of time. And depending to the level of rigidity, that child could have been down for 4, 6, maybe even 7 hours prior to this lady doing her assessment on the child. The child is cold to the touch. The child's not going to have that much body fat on him anyway, so he would lose body temp pretty quickly. But let's keep in mind, he's cold to the touch in a room that she admits that is hot and stuffy. So those are compelling elements, and the prosecution, I would think, would exploit this to some degree.
Let me ask you this, because I know there's been some testimony, and the mother couldn't remember if it was maybe 9:30 that morning or the night before. Had it been the night before, could that make sense of the timeline? And between 9:30 p.m. and the next day when the first responder, Tony, showed up, that's why this baby was stiff?
Yeah, that would put it well within those parameters, I would think. That's one of the things that we use to determine the postmortem interval PMI when we go out as medical legal death investigators on a scene to try to, you never can know an exact time of death, contrary to what you see on television. We ballpark it at best. The closest that we can generally get is probably about 2 to 3 hours. And the fact that you have a child, though, that is in full rigor mortis, she didn't comment on the jaw, but just the stiffening of the limbs, yeah, you're talking about a child that's well down range post-mortem at this point.
All right. Our own Kathy Rustin has looked at some of the pictures, so I have some good details I want to bring back to you as our expert. First, we're going to have to take a short break. Please come back and join us, Law and Crime, as we continue to cover this trial live. Gavel to gavel.
You are free to go, sir.
Kathy Rustin has shared with us, because she was able to know that the break when they wanted to talk to the judge outside the presence of the jury was because the prosecution wanted to introduce evidence through this witness that the defendant is involved in was involved in a Facebook group called Sexy Little Psycho Bitches. The judge did not allow that and said the only thing you can do is inquire about whether or not there's a Facebook account. Now, Joseph Scott Morgan, while I've got you, one of the things I wanted to ask you, again, Kathy Rustin saw pictures, and she said, listen, the house where baby Sterling is described as being in the swing in the corner facing the wall, in that house, the kitchen appeared to be very clean. There were dishes in the sink with soapy water as if they were being washed and clean. We know from other testimony there's food in the house. What do you make of that, where the house is not in deplorable conditions by accounts, at least not the kitchen, but yet this baby is left in a swing facing a wall in a hot, stuffy, stinky bedroom in part of the house? Those are very inconsistent.
Yeah, I think they are. And at first blush, you would almost think that implies that the child was almost an adjunct that was essentially non-essential. A darkened room, swing facing the wall, deplorable conditions, but yet you You shut the door behind you. You don't have to see the child. You don't have to hear the child. You go into the rest of the house, which is, obviously clean in some way, or to some degree cleaner certainly than that room. And there's foodstuffs in there where the child could have been nourished. It would appear that I'm assuming that the rest of the family was thriving. Why not this child? And I think that's a big question here.
Yeah, I agree. And poverty doesn't appear to be the issue, thankfully, in terms of not being able to afford food. We're going to return to the trial now again, and Cheyanne Harris charged with murder of her 4-month-old. Let's see who the next witness is. Here we're hearing from more law enforcement. Joseph, I want to come back to you because I have a question.
Property, even outside the home, sometimes is part of the crime scene. So you have to be very, very careful. The key is in any kind of death investigation is you start off very, very broadly, Ashley, and then you begin to kind of contract the scene as needs be. And that applies pretty much in every death investigation. In this particular case, I would have shooed everybody away. We would have secured the perimeter, the entire outside of the home, and then kind of worked from the out in. And that way you cast a wide net.
And that's what's interesting. I'm not saying anything was done wrong or not standard operating procedure, but I am going to say all the witnesses have testified. Basically, they went straight back to the bedroom, and that is where the child was. And that's why I wondered, because, again, the rest of the scene appears to be, and you just saw a picture with a couch in the living room, it's fairly organized, tidy, and it's not a deplorable home by any stretch. Now,
Right.
I'm going to stop there. I know that I have to sign off today. Joseph, I know you're staying with our next host. Thank you so much for being here. I always enjoy having you.
You bet, Ash.
And I want to tell our viewers, Brian Ross Investigates tonight, 7 o'clock. He is going to look inside El Chapo trial, the murders, the brides, the mistress. High drama over 10 weeks of testimony. Deliberations begin next week. Please join him tonight, 7 o'clock.
Welcome back to Law and Crime's live coverage of the Cheyanne Harris case out of Iowa, where a mother is on trial on charges she murdered her 4-month-old infant. Why is it a murder charge? Because in Iowa, child neglect, child endangerment of a certain level, which results in the death of a baby, automatically becomes murder by operation of law. So the state here is basically trying a child endangerment case along with proof that the baby died. That's how this works legally. Right now, the defendant herself is listening to her police interrogation play. It's been a little bit difficult to hear at times, but she's been talking about moving around a lot, moving to different places, etc., talking about changing schools, growing up. That's the point we're at right now. Let's listen in live, just the same as jurors are doing right now. We're listening to this interrogation recording of the defendant herself, Cheyanne Harris, facing murder charges over the death of her 4-month-old infant. Joseph Scott Morgan, forensic death examiner, still with us here on the Law and Crime Network. Joseph, we're hearing a lot of details here. We're hearing possible talk of SIDS as an excuse for this, discussions about trying methamphetamine before she moved to town. What's going on inside the mind of this defendant here?
I don't know. She seems markedly immature, that's for sure. And seems to be a lot of blaming going around about other people losing jobs and this sort of thing. Very dissettled, almost seems ruthless and drifting, if you will. Back to the issue of SIDS, this death was in no way related to SIDS, I can assure you. It does not fit within the parameters. In what specific way? Well, SIDS is generally found in healthy children, and the age range fits. But the problem is this: most of the time, these kids have healthy systems, lungs, this sort of thing, and they will pass in the night, generally with a pre-existing little cold is generally how parents will describe this, congestion, this sort of thing. This child clearly died as a result of neglect, starvation, dehydration, and plus the child had a systemic infection that was going on as well, which ultimately led to the child's death.
Joseph Scott Morgan, appreciate your insight on that matter. Of course, many others here. Forensic death examiner, you know the science, and you can see through some of the testimony that's been presented in court. Appreciate your insight. I know that you have to wrap up for the evening.
Hey, thanks for having me, Aaron, and good evening to you.
Okay, you as well. It's a difficult case. We've talked about that many times. I'm also going to be signing off. Heather Hansen will be here to continue coverage of this case as long as it runs, and also the McStay family murder case out of Southern California, where that defendant, Charles Chase Merritt, is accused of killing a family of 4 and then dumping their bodies in the Mojave Desert. Testimony in that case is also resuming. We will be live until about 7 o'clock. But as I said, it's my time to hit the road. Heather Hansen will be here in a couple of seconds. For now, this is Aaron Keller. Thanking you for watching me on the Law and Crime Network. I'll see you back on the debrief tomorrow at 4. Here's Heather.